One. You're on the air. Welcome to Talking Wax, everybody. I am Stefan ADIKA. I am your host. And before we go any further, please stop right there. Subscribe, like this channel. And if you like the content that we're providing you, please share it and send it to somebody you think might like it as well. Tonight, we're going to celebrate the birth of Donna, Stevie Nicks' debut record. That's right. The album turns 40 years old. It was released July 27th, 1981. It went number one in the U.S. Billboard charts in September of that year. Now, we have a lot to talk about. We have some special guests over here. We will be speaking with the fabulous Danny Goldberg. That's right. Danny, you see him right next to Stevie Nicks right there by the Talking Wax logo. He is the founding co-owner of Mercury Records. And roll it.
Talking Wax.
There's so much you have done, and I'm just getting to know more and more about you. You're like a hidden gem.
It's very nice of you, and I'm happy to do more of these. It's very flattering that you're interested in my history, and I love talking about rock and roll. So this doesn't have to be the last one, that's for sure.
No, it's wonderful. Danny Goldberg, there's a record that's coming out, and I want to know your relationship with this album. I think it's going to turn 40. It's going to be 40 years in July, right here. Does this ring a bell to you?
Yes, sir. Belladonna, a very, very important record in my life, and a great record. I'm so proud of Stevie for what she's accomplished. But that was her first solo album, and I had gotten to know her a few years before. She had been dating a very close friend of mine, Paul Fishkin. Paul was running Bearsville Records. I had a PR company, and Bearsville was one of my clients. And I got to realize that Stevie was frustrated in Fleetwood Mac because she wrote so many other songs, and they were very selective about which songs would go on a record, in part because of the songwriting money, and they didn't want one person to get a disproportionate amount of that money. And in particular, they hadn't included the song Silver Springs on Rumors, which infuriated her. And, we just saw that there was a chance to do something with her, because the other phenomenon about Stevie's career at that time was that she wasn't signed as an individual to Warner Brothers Records. Fleetwood Mac as a group had signed years earlier to Warner Brothers. But she and Lindsey Buckingham had only joined in the late 70s, I guess 78 or something like that, whenever that album called Fleetwood Mac came out that had the song Rhiannon on it. And I think originally they just wanted Lindsey. They needed a new lead guitar player. Bob Welsh had left. There'd been a series of lead guitar players in Fleetwood Mac over the years, Peter Green famously. And I think the story goes is that he says, well, my girlfriend's a singer. You got to take both of us. And they didn't know what they were getting. So they didn't bother to do an individual agreement, what's called a leaving members agreement with Stevie or Lindsey, because Fleetwood Mac had made a bunch of albums. They weren't all that successful as record sellers. They were in this kind of niche of British blues bands. They'd sell 100,000, 150,000, and they were by no means one of the most important 10 or 20 artists that Warner's had. And then almost immediately, the Fleetwood Mac album with Stevie's song Rhiannon became an explosive hit, and then it was too late to suddenly go and sign her. So they just let it drift. And so she was available as a solo artist, which is very rare that someone who's sung and written, number one hits is not under contract at the time. And we convinced her to be part of a new company that we ended up calling Mercury Records as a vehicle, really mostly for her solo albums. Belladonna was the first album that came out. I think it was the first one. We only put out a few records. And, went to number one. It sold, 10 million now in the year since then. And it was just an explosive success because she is incredibly talented. I mean, she wrote those songs. She is one of the great songwriters, besides having that signature voice. And, so that's the that's what I'm just babbling here because I get
No.
excited when I think about it. It was such an exciting thing to be part of, and introducing her to Jimmy Iovine, who then produced the record. This is before he was a billionaire. But he had produced Tom Petty's "Damn the Torpedoes," which is one of her favorite albums that had just come out. In the time period when she was thinking about doing Belladonna. And he obviously did an amazing job and got Tom to contribute Stop Dragging My Heart Around, which had originally been an outtake on, didn't make Damn the Torpedoes, and Jimmy had the clarity to see that as a duet it could be a hit.
Was it going to be a duet in the beginning, or was he Tom?
No, it was Tom. It was the original version. It was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. And then he had another song called Insider. I'm an insider, been burned by the fire. Great lyric, And so Stevie sang harmonies on that, and she sang, and then they did Stop Dragging. They reimagined Stop Dragging as a duet.
Yeah.
And, somehow Jimmy arranged it that the Stop Dragging was on the Stevie Nicks album, and I'm an Insider was on Tom Petty's next album. They're both great songs, but Stop Dragging was a massive hit. And Insider was just a great album cut. So that was a very helpful thing. And boom, we're off to the. I think that single was, if it wasn't number one, it was top 5. And then immediately after that, we had a duet with her and Don Henley, which she had done a demo with Don Henley of Leather and Lace years earlier. That knew exactly what that was going to sound like. Jimmy just recaptured that duet for a master quality version of it, and that was also a huge hit. And then that same album had Edge of 17, which Jimmy somehow Prince came into the studio. I think he co-wrote that song. He certainly was involved with the making of that record, and that's also that wasn't a pop hit, but it was a massive song on rock radio, and a huge part of the soul of that album, and why it's been such an enduring, popular album with people. And then there was a fourth single, a song that I just always loved. It was almost the first one because we just loved the lyric of it that she'd written years earlier, called After the Glitter Fades. So there were 4 singles on it, and this was the time when MTV was just starting to become important, and the video of her and Tom doing Stop Dragging My Heart Around was one of the most played videos of that year. Also, the
chemistry between them two, you could feel it.
Yeah,
like even that video right away, it's like, wow.
Yeah,
it was just heavy, and the vocals, the whole arrangement, just them. The call to each other, the answering the call, it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was just, again, Iovine is such a brilliant businessman. There are so many things that he's done successfully. There's that HBO multi-part thing with him and Dr. Dre heralding his career. But at that moment in time, the key was to maintain the connection to Fleetwood Mac's audience, but also do something different. So it didn't seem like a secondary version of Fleetwood Mac. And by having Tom involved, and by having Edge of 17, which had that kind of danceability to it, in Prince, it was just different enough to be fresh, but similar enough that the people who loved those Fleetwood Mac albums wanted it.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the tracks on here, there's not one bad song on this, Danny. There's not even a throwaway. Belladonna is a great opening track. Kind of a Woman, Stop Dragging My Heart. Think about it after and then that's the first side, but then the second side, it gets even better with the Edge of 17. How Still My Love, Leather and Lace. I mean, it gets better, the record, when you go through the tracks.
He's a great writer. That was the big thing that people didn't quite internalize. She was associated, she was so glamorous and, in the videos, and she had that voice. And it took a while for the kind of rock community to understand, oh my God, she wrote these songs. She wrote Dreams. She didn't co-write it. She wrote it. These songs are not co-written for the most part. I mean, I think music and lyrics, and, I'm so happy, she was nice enough to invite me and Fishkin to come when she was inducted a year or 2 ago into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I'm just so happy for her that she proved her you know, she's in the Hall of Fame as Stevie Nicks, as well as a member of Fleetwood Mac, and I think she obviously earned it. But it all started, that Stevie Nicks career started with Belladonna.
Yeah, that was that the first from Modern Records as well? Was that your first? Was that?
You know, I can't remember. We had two other records that we put out while I was involved. You know, I was involved with, you know, I sold my half of Modern after the release of the next Stevie Nicks album. But we had two other records that didn't do very well. One was by an artist that Paul Fishkin knew named Joey Wilson, and one was by a reggae group that I knew called Jamala, and neither of them made any kind of a commercial impact. I think, you know, we had to wait for about a year to really have Belladonna recorded after we made the deal to create Modern Records with Stevie Nicks on the roster, because she had to finish her work on the Fleetwood Mac album Tusk, and, you know, which has also great songs on it like Sarah. So while we were waiting, I think we put out a couple of other records, but I can't tell you that they were particularly memorable. I mean, they were records that we liked by artists that I still think are talented, but they didn't make any significant impact on audiences, you know. But Belladonna was a monster.
I mean, it's great when you think about the time that went. The birthday is coming up for Belladonna in July, and the music, it's just timeless. It's like a fine wine. It just gets better and better. This album.
Well, she's a great artist. You know, look, she's a classic rock artist. So is Fleetwood Mac. Again, one of the great songwriters and one of the great singers of that generation. So obviously, you know, mostly people that are older that were Fleetwood Mac or Stevie Nicks fans like these things. But, you know, there was just a huge resurgence of her song Dreams, which wasn't on Belladonna, but which was on the Fleetwood Mac album before it. I mean, it was some TikTok video and it got zillions and zillions of streams. So she's the real deal. She's on a very short list of great rock artists, and an even shorter list of women singer-songwriters who made it in rock and roll at that level. Very, very short list. She has a lot to be proud of.
And when you go back, telling the story about how Lindsay, they were looking for the guitar player, and then it's a package deal. You got to take both of us. And here she is, like this hidden gem just comes out here with all this gold. I mean,
well, I think that she always knew who she was. When I met her, I mean, she knew she had this piano, this Bosendorfer piano. She was always writing songs. She had all these other songs connected to Rhiannon mythology. The original thing I tried to do with her was try to get a movie made based on Rhiannon, which we failed to get actualized, but it created the relationship that led to the creation of the label and the solo career. And I think she always knew who she was as an artist, certainly by the time I met her. But it took a few minutes, a few cycles for the rest of the world to realize who she was. But they realize it now.
Now they know. You know, and I know time is running for you, and you're busy, but fans ask questions here. And I got a fan that had a question. They shout out here, Sharon Solani, a friend of ours. You might know Sharon.
Sure, of course.
Sharon goes, how
background singers on all these records, very, very close to Stevie, and an incredibly talented singer.
Yeah,
you know, two background singers, Laurie Perry and Sharon Solani, and they were like those three voices were incredible on a lot of the choruses and in live shows, of course.
Yeah, she's a big part, because originally Stevie was looking to do kind of a Crosby, Stills, and Nash type thing. Is that true, that she wanted to get that kind of vibe?
I don't remember that conversation, but she's very creative. I'm sure she's thought about a lot of different things. I met Fishkin years earlier. I had a job in 71 or 72. I forget what it was, working for Albert Grossman's music publishing company. Albert Grossman was my idol. He had been Bob Dylan's manager. He managed the band, Janis Joplin, and just the idea that I could even meet Albert Grossman. So this job opened up, and I worked there for about a year. I was not particularly good as a music publishing executive, but Paul Fishkin arrived in Albert's world around the same time from Philadelphia. He had been very good friends with Todd Rundgren. I think they went to high school together. I know that Todd's well-known song, "We Got to Get You a Woman," was written about Paul. And so Fishkin and I just hit it off immediately and became very, very close friends. And then as the 70s went on, that friendship developed. Then by 73, I then went to work for Led Zeppelin and was vice president of their label Swan Song, always with friends with Paul during those times. And then when I left Swan Song in '76, I started a PR company. And one of my first clients, by this time, Paul's become president of Bearsville Records, which was Albert Grossman's label. Their biggest act at that time was Foghat, and they also still had Todd Rundgren. And Paul was a hot executive, very sophisticated about record promotion, particularly on the radio promotion, but still had this kind of very hip vibe about him that connected with artists. And again, by that time we were very, very close friends. So he got me all the Bearsville artists and the Bearsville label as a PR client. They were one of the two key clients I had that allowed me to be in business. And then during that time is when he met Stevie. I think he met Stevie at a Warner Music convention. Their distribution company was called WEA, which stood for Warner Electra Atlantic. I think it was in Mexico, but I wasn't there when they met. But he called me. He says, "I'm going out with Stevie Nicks." He was so excited, and pretty soon after, you've got to meet her, So pretty soon after that, I met her. The first time I met her was we had a PR event for Foghat. They had done a benefit to raise money to buy blues albums for the New York Public Library, some PR gimmick to just get some visibility. And she came to one of those events and met her then, and we just hit it off immediately. She had all these other interests that she felt that people around Fleetwood Mac were encouraging. And she wanted her friend Margie, who designed her dresses, to be in Vogue. And I tried to get her into Vogue, not successfully, but she liked it. And the Rhiannon movie idea. And then she had the song Ladyfish and the Goldfish. So I was just like, I literally started just going out to LA. I had her home number and she liked having me around. And, she eventually broke up with Paul, but she stayed friendly with him. And I had this sort of, other business relationship. I was the alternative business person who she could talk to, who wasn't dependent or getting paid by Fleetwood Mac. And she loved Fleetwood Mac, and she still does, but she had all these other creative interests, which flowered so successfully on Belladonna. So I played that role during that time of anything that non-Fleetwood Mac, and I would just anything I could do to try to deliver for her, because it was obvious to me. The first time I saw her sit down at the piano at this house she had, it was on El Contento in the, old Hollywood. I just said, oh my God, as good as she was on those Fleetwood Mac records, I saw it was so obvious how much more there was there. And for me, trying to make it in the music business, to have a relationship with Stevie Nicks at that time professionally was valuable. And she's so nice. She was so generous emotionally and made everyone feel involved. That's the other thing about her, is she's a very nice person and a very giving of energy to other people. Not every star does that. Some of them take up all the energy. She gives energy to other people. She makes the people around her feel more important and part of her thing. I learned a lot from that. I've never met anyone I've met a lot of and worked with a lot of great artists, but never met anybody more generous that way than she was. So in that context, the idea for Modern Records came up.
It came up. Wow, what incredible! And
I think, like Paul and I were like, how do we mention the record thing to her? Because we knew that in terms of money, other ideas were great, but a Stevie Nicks solo album it did exactly what I thought it would do. It was not a hard thing to predict if you were open-minded about it. The people around Fleetwood Mac were myopic because they were so bought into the idea that everything revolved only around Mick Fleetwood, who was incredibly talented. But if you got 6 inches away from that little circle, it was obvious this was a very safe bet to bet on Stevie Nicks at that point.
Were they afraid? Like, we could lose Stevie now. Now she has this great record, these great songs. Was that ever any rumblings of that?
I think it interfered with their renegotiation of the Fleetwood Mac deal. I think they were, of course, worried it would be now a competitive source of her energy. And she kept saying, I'm not going to leave Fleetwood Mac. I just want to also do this. And 40 years later, it's obvious that she kept her word. And oh my God, when I saw Mick Fleetwood at that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing, he was so lovely and gracious. But at that time, he wasn't so lovely and gracious. He was pretty freaked out by the whole thing.
Of course. That's great. Of course, you're going to be freaked out. It's Stevie Nicks. Oh, we could have a chance. I wonder if Fleetwood Mac would a little worry, like, how come we didn't take these songs for our next record? I mean,
You know, you have to ask them. Look, it's not
Yeah.
like they didn't have other good songwriters.
No, I know.
McVie wrote hits, Lindsay wrote hits, and there was a culture of the group that had its own dynamic to it. But I've always wondered if they thought, gee, maybe if we'd put Silver Springs on Rumors, we
Right.
had this particular problem.
Right. I mean, it's a good question. You know, it's
You know what? They did fine. Stevie
did
did fine. And by the grace of God, for me, it was life-changing because it really was a huge growth spurt in my career. And I'm so grateful to her for trusting me at that time, because I certainly didn't have the resume that warranted that kind of relationship with her. But we did create the situation that she wanted to have Belladonna, so we did deliver. Grateful for it. And yeah, what a team, you know, and also just to get Jimmy Iovine at that point in his career. He was so focused and ambitious. And yeah, the planets really lined up nicely, and I'm so glad people still care about the record and how well she's done, especially this last several years. It couldn't happen to a more talented or more lovely human being.
Yeah, you know, Danny, I thank you for being here. You know what? And I know your time
Yeah,
is of the essence here.
Man, but I'm very grateful to talk to you. I love your show and your passion for rock and roll. I share it.
Of course.
I'm happy to hang out anytime.
Danny, anytime. And me and you are Circus Magazine alumni.
Exactly. It's a fraternity.
Love talking with you. You know what? I'm going to bring you, we got to do this again. I want to talk about the band, The Last Waltz, next time. But you know what? Belladonna, happy birthday. It's 40 years of this. Thank you for making this happen and, you know, making.
Well, Stevie made it happen. Well, anyway, nice to hang out. Bye-bye.
We'll see you.